Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Queerness Diaries. So today I'm very excited because I am joined all the way from New York with that fantastic backdrop to boot as well. So hi, Robert. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Connor. It's so nice to see you across the pond on this dreary day in New York.
Well, honestly, the backdrop still looks fantastic, to have that city in the background. So I hope you're having a fantastic time there and the weather's a little bit warmer than it is here in the UK.
Possibly. It's
Yeah.
pretty right now.
Yeah, I can't believe the year's already almost over, Christmas coming already, but I'm super excited, to have you on the podcast today to delve into all the wonderful work you've done as a writer and also into your story as well, because I think it'd be fantastic to hear a bit about your diary and then later on in the podcast get to delve into all the fantastic work you've done and brought to life. So just to introduce yourself first of all, so if we start off and yeah, so if you give the world your introduction from that fantastic view you've got there in New York.
I'd be happy to. Well, my life has been a curious trajectory to date. I've always been a creative since I was a little boy, both writing and visually, creating art and doing paintings and that sort of thing. And I kind of went into the more visual direction as I went through my education and through college,
Yeah,
more towards architecture and design.
yeah,
I love and I still love. And then but within that I always did some painting and I always did some writing, and it was just kind of like going like this all along, and of course I needed to make money
yeah, yeah,
for career.
yeah.
So I did that through architecture and visual communications and design with a business in San Francisco for about 20 years.
Nice.
uh,
Yeah,
yeah, and then it just kind of hit me. I started writing short stories. I just had the urge to write again, and I wasn't feeling the need to get some paintings out after
yeah,
a fairly prolific period of painting. And I started writing and I started putting together these short stories that were more based on my life with a little bit of fiction. And as
yeah,
created more and more and built them into this opus of about 500 pages, it became
yeah.
more and more and more and more fiction. Fiction
Nice.
took over, and the framework of my life was part of the story, but I would say 25% or less, and then 75% fiction.
Oh, nice. And it's so rewarding, isn't it, when you can get a piece of art and you've got an idea to go through that creative process of bringing it to life. And then when you get to the end result, it's like one of those moments where you're like, damn, I created that. And then it gives you so much confidence to go on to something else. And you start to develop all these characters or art pieces, this sort of almost worldscape that you've got of all these, art pieces for the future. So it's a really, I imagine, super exciting process.
It is very exciting, and the idea of writing a novel never really occurred to me.
Yeah.
So it's sort of been, it just kind of like happened.
Yeah, yeah.
Learned every single day out of the gate.
Yeah.
I'm still learning every step of the way, at least for this first novel, which is very different than a painting that you can produce within a day or within a week and get very instant gratification. Often, with paintings and visual arts or even design, it's, you're not as successful as you want to be. But
Yeah.
this is quick, so you can move on. But with writing, it's a much slower, you can go back and revise, and you can
Yeah.
mold and create, this piece of uh, art, I guess, if you want to think of writing as art, which I do. You can
Yeah.
do it over time and really mold it differently with the characters and all of that.
Yeah, it's so true. And what I really love with your writing as well is you can kind of see how you bring the almost the scenes to life. Like you can really visualize yourself there. It almost feels like a movie in the sense where, it could be so easily adapted into like a TV show or a movie because you paint such a great picture of each of the scenes you go into, but you still give those characters the space to breathe at the same time. So it's, it takes a lot of guts, I think, to put out a story when you first start writing and to sort of have that process of putting something together and then to put it out there into the world for everyone to hear because, you have that. I imagine that process of you see the story through your eyes, but you never know how it's going to connect with other people. But what I really love is your writing really spoke to me. I really saw myself a lot in, and people I know as well. I think it's very relatable with a lot of the characters. So that's always, a sign of a really great story writer and being able to bring that right into life off the page. I always say a great story is one where you end up daydreaming about it and you wonder when you go to bed, what, I've not read the next page yet, but I want to find out in the morning or what happens next for these characters.
That's so complimentary, and it's so great to hear. I'm just uh, taken back by how much you enjoyed it, and that makes me feel good. The interesting thing about writing the scenes and writing about the environments, several people have brought it up, and I wonder if like my architectural background makes
Yeah.
me walk through spaces in more of a three-dimensional way, so that when I'm writing, I think of all of the space
Yeah.
without even realizing it. I'm sort of putting that onto the page. I think there's something to that. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, definitely. Because, as I was reading, I visualized, even though I've never been, over to I mean, I was in New York briefly when I was 16, 17, but I could imagine myself on those streets and around, the West Village area and also in New Jersey, the difference of the worlds as well, because, when you are a small town guy and go to the city and suddenly it's so free and liberating, it's kind of similar in a way to a lot of the smaller towns in the UK and then the big cities like Manchester or London, where suddenly it's like stepping into, even if it's only, 30 miles away, a whole different world to what you've grown up with.
yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking of that as you were saying it, like when you were saying you related to Andy and the characters, like, well, being in Northern England, when you first went to London, it must have been
Yeah.
culture shock and
Oh,
also
yeah.
excitement of what's going to happen. Like, what's ahead for me, and what do I want. Like we're creative, so it's like we're interested in meeting people and seeing art and experiencing things that are going to take us to a different place in life. And like it's an open book when you come to
Yeah.
like London or New York or Manchester, I assume. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true because as much as we have an idea of what these places will be like, it's a different thing imagining it. And then once you step in, it's like, as much as you think you know about the world, you suddenly step into the big city and suddenly everything you thought you knew about life, it's like, damn, I didn't know anything.
It's so true. And it's interesting now, like, when I come to New York, I tend to stay in the West Village um, as well. And it's changed quite a bit, but I still get to walk past some of the places that I cite in the book, and they're still there. And
Yeah.
it's very interesting as a, older, mature man to sort of see these places and think of being 18 or 19 and what
Yeah.
they, like a bar like Julius or something, what it meant to me then and what it represents now. It's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always think as well when it comes to a piece of writing or, any form of art, even though your feelings and experiences can change over time, when you either read that page again or you look at that piece of art again, the memories, it takes you instantly back to that time. So it's like our thoughts and evolution can change a lot, as we grow up and our experiences change. We change so much as people, but we instantly can get transported back to a certain moment in time. When we listen to a certain song or, so, it's like suddenly you're back at whether it's your first gay bar or whatever it is. You always remember that night.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Because our characters are, pretty much the same, and then we can transpose back to childhood or being a young adult, and just the excitement. I mean, just remember
Yeah.
the incredible excitement, and that's what I tried to portray. In the novel with Andy was like the uncertainty, the excitement, and I think what really comes through is the vulnerability. And a lot of
Yeah.
people are unaware of what LGBTQ plus young adults go through with
Yeah, so true.
almost preying upon them or taking advantage of them, and they can't really talk to anyone. I think then it's better now, but it's still, depending on someone's family and their background, it's still, or culture, it's still part of the part of the part of what they're going through. So I really tried to bring that in, because part of this novel, not only to entertain, is to show the vulnerability and how, I don't like to use the word normal, but how human LGBTQ people are, as well as that,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
similar to everyone else, and
Yeah.
to sort of take away some of those myths that it's all about sex or it's all about this
Mm.
or that. And, we're just human beings basically searching for love and wanting to
Yeah.
be loved and give love and be creative and be good people. And I've gotten some nice responses from readers who didn't expect that, and think
Yeah.
now about if their children grow up to be LGBTQ, like their reaction has shifted, because um, understanding and seeing through the book and through the novel, what the children are, what the young adults in this, Andy and his friend Elena and et cetera, are going through.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think, it's a very much timeless feeling, the feelings we get around coming out, no matter what era we're in or grown up in. It's like it's always going to be something that we're, nervous about. How will our parents react? How are we going to approach coming out to friends? And coming out often feels like almost a never-ending process as well, because there's always someone new that we question how much we should open up around, and will they, won't they react well to it. And so I think that's something that, yeah, it's very relatable, whatever era someone has lived, that nervousness, when you come out and how it's going to be received. It's something that a lot of us have been through, and I'm really excited to, get into the summer between, because it's amazing how much can happen in one summer and how much it can change the rest of the course of your life and set up. I always say in our own stories, there can be, you never know how long or short a chapter is going to be, but you never know either when the pen is suddenly going to fall on a very defining chapter. And, for Andy, this is a very summer with a lot of life lessons, everything that he thought he knew about the world and guys and how he navigated situations kind of gets flipped on its head. And so, what made you decide, first of all, to kind of set the story in the summer of 1978 and choose that as sort of the time that you really wanted to focus on?
Well, I think the title "The Summer Between" alludes to the summer between high school and college, the summer between being a teenager or an older teenager, 18-year-old, and a young adult, the summer between questioning and certainty. So
Yeah,
very much love the concept of setting the entire novel within these months, this
yeah,
bracket of, high school graduation and the start of college for this
yeah,
particular young man. And setting it in 1978 just seemed so curious to me, because things were so different, and it's actually like edited as a historical novel, so everything is fairly factual, and
yeah,
the names and that sort of thing. But it was before cell phones and the internet, and just modes of communication were so different.
oh
And
yeah,
it was just fascinated me to go back to that and see
yeah.
what the Moors were like and what sexuality was like. And what I realized is it's actually very contemporary. I mean, it
Yeah, yeah,
feels so much like a period piece because the themes work concurrent with contemporary themes and Moors, and what we call fluidity now then was
yeah,
just didn't have a name, but people were pretty much doing the same sorts of things. So I think for me, it was like a curiosity. It was close to the period when I came out. So I was able to borrow a lot
yeah,
of familiar settings, uh,
yeah.
maybe one or two like familiar incidents, and just fictionalize those and expand upon those.
Yeah, for sure. And it does such a great job as well of transporting you to that time from the music, to the Rolling Stones concert. It does feel very much like you have stepped back. And even though it's not, an era I lived, I can imagine myself trying to navigate that, like it made me think as well, like as much as I've had as a teenager, especially when I was on my own journey with coming out, kind of hiding away online, the nerves that must have been for people and someone possibly ringing the house phone and their mother or father, picking it up, the things that you don't even consider thinking
Oh,
about
right.
now, in the mobile era and social media, like the time before that when someone was navigating, aspects of their own queer journey, but also in a time where you're so nervous about being caught out and kind of living an almost double life. It must have been so much more difficult when we didn't have, social media and all these things we take for granted.
I don't know. Like in some ways, I think it was easier because you
Yeah.
were able to, like, you didn't know otherwise. So you were able to navigate and work through that. And that was like really fun to sort of think about, like, oh, yeah, you had to find a quarter to go to this glass booth to make a
Yeah.
call.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
always like not perfect and that sort of thing, the sound and all of that. And but somehow we did it, but it also gave you a little bit more autonomy because you were able to not be seen and known
Yeah.
all the time. So for a subculture like being, gay and lesbian at that time, you were already kind of hiding, and it allowed you another layer to hide behind, if you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. And I think as well with Andy, if he'd been in the modern era, he definitely would have been the type with all of his crushes to be on trolling through every Instagram post and Facebook
I
and
love.
everything, And so I think having it set in this era, it keeps the mystery of all the different characters throughout because, often he's kind of stuck with his own thoughts. And so he's kind of imagining, and at least I tend to do this a lot, or I have done in the past, when you've got the image of someone is not always how they really are. And when you get to know them more in real life, it can shift a lot. And so that's something that social media has kind of taken away a little bit, that sort of mystique, the mystery of getting to know someone. We try and find
Absolutely.
out everything we can now, and it's often all online. And so
I can
there's,
get all the statistics first before you
yeah,
even
so true.
hear somebody's voice or see them, which is bizarre in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of, you just brought something up that never occurred to me. Who would Andy Pollock be today? Like, what would he be like, as an 18-year-old in 2024, 2025? That
Yeah.
is fascinating. And I'm going to think about that.
Yeah, because I thought about that, because I can imagine a lot of myself in him. And I kind of want to talk as well how you sort of brought him and the other characters to life, because I sort of see a lot of myself in him at that age. He's grown up in an environment which is very much surrounded by strong women, and they've had to be because, he's had a lot happen even in these 18 years. His dad's kind of out the picture off in Norway, and he kind of has almost an anxious attachment style to guys. So it's kind of like, when he feels someone is maybe pulling away, that sort of anxiety, which a lot of us feel of abandonment. And a lot of the story feels like finding his own sort of journey and path to being able to be present in the moment, which really comes through at the very end. But a lot of us, especially when we're navigating coming out, finding ourselves, every guy we meet or the first night out, all these things we put so much expectation on and so much excitement and first kiss, first love, all these things we make into these really monumental feelings. And for a lot of the other characters in the book who are slightly older, for them, it's not such of, a big feeling or as grandiose as Andy has it in his mind. But we've kind of all been there, when we're first navigating, coming out, going onto the gay scene, finding ourselves, are very much romanticizing people, romanticizing a lot of things. And it's definitely a journey, isn't it, to sort of finding ourselves. So how was it sort of bringing Andy to life?
It was interesting because I think Andy, out of all of the characters, is closest to a real character being myself. However, I created pivots where I wanted him to experience things that I didn't, which would take me out of it being anything like a memoir or anything, because it's definitely not. But I think like putting him in a family of women, only women, strong women. I love that idea because I wanted to develop the character as a man.
Yeah.
Yes, as a gay man, but he's not initially sure. But as a man, like a male, if that's better, a male character in this, and just kind of like a guy who just happens to be gay. And that's his character. That's not every gay character, of course, but that's the character I wanted to explore. And his relationship to his ex-girlfriend and the sexual tumbles and encounters that they had together. And then she was his ally. And you know what? It's interesting. I was inspired by probably my favorite book, which I read many times as a teenager, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 by Hermann Hesse. And it was the education, as you're aware, of a young man, spiritual journey, and all of these people that he encounters and sort of influence his decision making and allowing him to become the man that he becomes. So a very broad sense was what I tried to, carve into and create with this story.
Yeah, and you definitely, straight away get a sense of who he is and also the people around him. I think as much as it is Andy's story, a lot of the characters go on their own big journeys in the book as well, because you see Elena go through a lot of sort of trials and tribulations too throughout. And also with Leah, you get, the sense that she's been very disappointed by the men in her life. She's thrown herself into work as a single mother, kind of having to fight, but she still feels guilty about opportunities coming her way. And because she's had such a bad history and bad luck with the men in her life, she's kind of a little bit jaded, but she still has that hope
Yes.
for love as well. So she's also on her own journey throughout the book as well.
That's very astute, because I very much did not want it to be just about Andy. I wanted to show, well, a heterosexual or whatever Elena described herself as woman can go through similar things, as can an older woman, as can an uncle, and some of the other characters, a boyfriend throughout the book. Like everyone goes through various struggles in different ways. And I think that, that's where the most of the fun came in writing this, was just really thinking about these characters and having them, these strange little offshoots in their lives occur, but keep it authentic. That was my thing. Keep it authentic. I don't want this to become like, some fable or something.
Yeah, but you did such a fantastic job of bringing all those characters to life, and there's a lot of things in each character that can relate from either friends of mine or like long distance relatives. There's like different pieces of each character that I can recognize with a lot of people. And we've all been there, that first experience, like coming out and the nerves around it, because that's kind of how the story starts with Elena. And they've already had this relationship. So, it's starting what is going to be a very eventful summer, but it's kind of like we all remember, being at whatever age we came out, and that feeling of just we need to tell somebody. We
Mhm.
cannot bottle in all these feelings anymore. And also their reaction, sometimes people feel almost like a sense of loss, shock, like was I just an experiment? All these different things can go through the other person's mind as well. And so it's fantastic to see the strength of their friendship and how they, because I imagine, going back to that time, thought of being outed, or even someone, especially in a small town, someone possibly outing you, there's a lot of fear surrounding that. Even in a big city, when you're navigating that process and adding hormones and adrenaline and being a teenager, it just makes that emotion, tenfold, right?
And hence the explosive summer, hence like
Yeah.
everything that happened because of all of those bottled emotions and attributes that you just described. And it's interesting, Elena is like 100% fiction, where Andy is, has pieces of me in him, in his character. But, with Elena, I was really fascinated to create, who she would be. And in my mind, I pictured, and see, I'd love to hear if you think these are good matches. I was either picturing Emma Stone or Billie Eilish. They were my best
Ah,
friend.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I
Like
can imagine because she's
quirky
sort of,
and kind of,
yeah.
but sexual and, just kind of
Yeah.
like game on.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the things that I really love about Elena is even though she doesn't understand everything, she is very open and she becomes increasingly, open as the book goes on. But, we've all been there, like when we first come out to a friend and we just want someone that we can, even if it's just being able to gossip about guys, just have that freedom to have that outlet because until then, we spend so much time in our heads, and it's so freeing to be able to have that open conversation. Because I mean, I know Andy kind of has it in, well, this is a very curious character with Ollie, this teacher relationship that's kind of transformed into, you know, it's like Elena immediately picks it up. It's like, this is a bit crazy. Like you've hooked up with your teacher. He's done this in Andy's mind as a kind of favor, but as it goes on, it's like, well, maybe this was a bit messed up. I'm 18 now. He's known me for however many years, and Ollie is meant to be around, early 30s, right? And they've had
Yeah.
that relationship with a closeness where Leah also knows him very well. It's a very, I imagine, very small town, close-knit community. And so it's kind of like the relationship, whilst Andy starts by seeing a lot of the good things in a way, like I've got to have my first experience with him or open up to, well, what were his intentions? It was a bit strange at the end, like because I think he's very naive, isn't he, Andy, in a lot of ways. And as he realizes, and
Yeah,
life
it takes
happens.
other people, pardon it,
Yeah,
it takes other people to tell him this
yeah,
wasn't right. This was
yeah,
not appropriate. This was not something that should have happened. And here he is kind of bragging about it like it's, like
yeah,
this wonderful thing that's happened, but he's a little uncertain. He knows that, but he's kind of like, like good notch here. And then everyone's telling him, "Oh, that's not right." And there's
yeah,
something is wrong with that equation. Um,
yeah,
and Elena are so, I tried to get across how protective they are of each other
yeah,
throughout this story. They really love each other and care for each
yeah,
other
for sure.
and look out for each other. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that the good thing as well that you see with their friendship is that they can call each other out, because we always need friends that are going to hold us accountable. And even though at times, like she goes on her own wild journey and so a lot of crazy stuff happens to her too, you need those friendships where you can be open and honest with each other, and be able to confide in and not feel judged at the same time and kind of joke with each other. Sometimes laughter is the best medicine for traumatic situations.
Yeah, and they definitely poke each other in that way
Yeah.
consistently. It's part of their chemistry and dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah, and you also get the sense as well in the early chapters that, and I can relate to this a lot. I think a lot of people can with Andy as he starts to venture. It feels like he's venturing closer and closer to that first night out on the town, and we start to get our own ideas about expectations, how that's going to be. We tend to romanticize it, and as it gets closer, it's like I've been there myself. I remember being about 17 in London and walking through Soho, and I was still too young to go out. And, uh, you know, when I was 18 and went on my first night out, I remember I snuck down on the train. I was super nervous. I went out on my own. I pretended to my parents that I was going to a friend's like house party, but really I was sneaking down on the train and having to text, my mom and pretend. And I remember sneaking to this club called Heaven in London, but being so nervous
Been
that
there.
yeah. So it, the one with the sticky dance floors in London. And I remember being so nervous that I watched people going in, but then I sat and drank for courage on a bench for the longest time near the club before I could go in to kind of get, you hear throughout the book the word courage and get that sort of
Yes.
we have to hype ourselves up, and you really feel that with Andy as well. It's like he's got this idea about going out, but once the night finally arrives where he's like, let's do this, he kind of gets a bit of that flight or fight mode, which I think a lot of us can relate to, right?
I think so. Yeah. No matter what your sexuality is, or like as young adults, I think that's part of the equation when you're trying to become an adult and fit into that new world.
Yeah, it's so true because I often think, and this happens in the book, it goes on to a very dark chapter after this when he has his night out. And I think for a lot of us, the sort of expectation versus reality surrounding, those first experiences can be very eye-opening as well, because we have these expectations of what it's going to be. We romanticize it, and then life happens, And for Andy, it ends up being, goes into his first gay bars. He's very new, he's not dressed how they are in the city, That
Mhm.
happens to a lot of us as well. Like, it's like, how do we dress? How do we approach guys? How do we look cool and desirable and appealing? As much as we think we know about the world, everything's all new to us. And it ends up being, a very dark night for him. He wakes up, doesn't know what's happened. And I imagine, for him, having that expectation of what it was going to be and then waking up like what the hell happened must have been a very big shock to almost the naive expectations that he'd had up until that point.
Yeah, and I think, you know what, Connor, I think that was probably the most difficult part of the book to write,
Yeah.
because I didn't want to make it like to sensationalize it, and I wanted to try to keep it real, but I also knew where that storyline was heading with,
Yeah.
a little bit lighter again.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get that impact authentically, and
Yeah.
it was, yeah, that probably had the most rewrites, like just
Yeah.
trying to get that balance, of
Yeah. Yeah.
character would react uh to the situation. I don't want to give anything away, like you're not trying to give anything away,
Yeah,
so
I try not to give too
probably
much
like,
away,
what
but
are
sort
you
of
talking about?
yeah, yeah, and so I think as well after that, it's like without these, because throughout the book, without that situation happening, it couldn't lead to, you know, the other things that happen. It's funny how things in life, like, one night or whatever it is, can completely change the course of who we're meant to meet, who's meant to come into our life, all the things that can happen later. And then, that brings in one of the the main characters of the book as well with Ben. And it's funny because again, this is like I've been there as well. Like when you meet someone and you have all that excitement about meeting them and you really romanticize the idea of them and what they could be. And sometimes, when you meet them, I think it's very easy to put these expectations on them and really romanticize them, especially when it's the first person that you really, get these crushes on and all this stuff. But then the person can change as well. And once you get to know them, the idea of them can shift a lot. And it does feel like they're very much at two different places in their life.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I really enjoyed writing the part where they first meet,
Yeah.
and just that feeling of uncertainty and excitement that Andy had. And
Yeah.
even not sure if Ben was gay or interested, and just kind of going through that. And his conversation with Elena on the train really, I don't know, just really warms me.
Yeah, for sure.
Little piece, just because it's a little bit matter of fact, but it says a lot. I think the dialogue, I mean, that's one thing about the book, and some people have said, wow, there's a lot of dialogue in it, but I think that's just such a great way to tell about the characters in their own voice. And why
Yeah.
can't a novel have a fair amount of dialogue? Why not? It's just a
Oh,
different
yeah, for sure.
form, and I think it works in this sense. But yeah, no, I agree. Like Ben is kind of like, I don't want to give anything away again, but a little bit of a shining, knight of shining armor that suddenly pops into the story.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's happened, to a lot of us where we kind of meet someone and we're at different levels of comfortability with ourselves as well. It's like, we have, especially, when you're from a small town and you haven't been able to, especially, somewhere so open like New York, even back then by comparison to a small town, suddenly, all these ideas that you have of people and even some internalized homophobia, all these things that, you have to work through sometimes. And then when you meet someone that's so open, it can be very confronting at first because it's like, well, I've had all these ideas about the world, but really I don't know anything at all.
It's
And
true. It's true.
yeah, and I think, it definitely happens a lot with us. But what I love, throughout the book, and yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but I always get super excited. But seeing, the dynamics and how that shifts, and also the message as well, I think with Andy about becoming more and more present, and also the need to address things from the past that happened. A lot of us tend to sweep things under the rug. And somehow, in life, things we can try and push things away, different scenarios, people, but unless we deal with it, it finds a way to reoccur again. We have to confront the problem.
Yeah, and for the arc to continue to grow, and that's what I tried to do with the story arc. It picks up a little bit of speed, and like more additional things continue to happen, another big moment. um and I'm curious, like, as the reader, did you feel that build? Did
Oh
you
yeah, for sure.
Oh, good, good, good.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I feel like as well that I can relate a lot to it feels like often when we navigate, once we start coming out to someone and suddenly we start going out as well, all these things, it's like all the chapters prior have seemed very, even if chaotic things have happened, they seem like very nonchalant, easygoing chapters. And then suddenly it's like life starts happening very fast and so many experiences and different things start coming at us. And it can be very exciting, but overwhelming too, because it's like part of your brain is still very naive and very young, but suddenly it's like you're faced with, college, studies, adulthood. experiences, finding yourself. And it's like, we're not fully prepared, but we don't want to reject these experiences either, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, and you know, like, you know, not he becomes a little cocky and he gets a little bit more strength to fight back, which he
Yeah.
at the beginning he didn't, you know, he didn't really have, and that's part of the arc towards the, you know, the final moments of the story.
Yeah, I really loved, you know, the journey that he goes on throughout the book. And what I love as well is it sets itself up at the end for, like, I feel like I have to know now about the rest of his life, you know, follow him through his 20s and 30s and see how everything shaped up after, you know, I was getting towards the end and I was like, damn, I'm running out of pages. I don't want this to end because I know I'm gonna get to the end. And I think that's a real example of the great writing you've done because, you know, I definitely left wanting to know, like, okay, what's his experience going to be next, you know, because so much can happen in a summer, but it sets it up for this really the start of so much more, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting that you say that. Like, I've started writing a second book, not a sequel to this, something different, like a palate cleanser.
Yeah.
Um, Totally different story about an 80-year-old woman who lives in a co-op, who's lived in the same co-op for most of her life. But then I hope to go back. I have two more to make a trilogy, two more
Yeah.
pieces of this story, and these sort of like the following year, summer into the year, and then the final chapter. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that I want to see where they go too, because I don't know exactly. I have it outlined and I have an idea, but to dig into the storyline and all, oh my God, it's just so exciting to me. But I feel like I
Yeah.
want to do something a little different first
Yeah, for sure.
and go back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so exciting, you know, how, when you have a story that can have so many, you know, so many different roads that he could go to for the future, and so it's left very open-ended with that excitement. And what was it like for you once you had finished the book and you were like, yeah, I feel like because I imagine, you know, as a writer, you go through so many pages or different scenes that you go back to. What was it like once you finished and you were like, yeah, I'm gonna put this out there into the world?
Very interesting, because I never felt like it was completely finished. I still don't. Like, if I reread sections, there are things I want to change
Yeah,
or, you know, like make, but I think it was very gratifying and very satisfying, you know, like writing a book, which I wasn't aware of, takes several people. You need editors and copywriters and
yeah,
developers and then the publishers. And it never really changed much at all.
yeah,
But when it was finished, I just felt so proud in a way,
yeah,
grateful um, for those that were part of the process and my beta readers who gave me feedback. And it was just like, I don't know, like, to go back to architecture, like
mm,
designing a building and having it complete,
yeah,
or doing a painting that you're really proud of. It was a project that came to an end that I felt, okay, I feel good about this project. You know, like, I
yeah,
feel good, and I want people to discover it. And
oh
that's
yeah,
kind of what the phase I'm in now, which never occurred to me like that. You know, I don't
mhm,
consider it promotion, but it's like, I just want to find readers that will enjoy it. You know, it's
yeah, for sure.
about selling books. It's about some of the response that I've gotten back, like your beautiful words today, just make me think people will enjoy this. Many people will enjoy this,
Mhm,
but they have to find it. So I'm working
yeah.
out to get the word out, you know, so that people can be entertained and maybe a little educated, or just taken to a different era and a different place with characters that are mostly likable, I believe.
Yeah, for sure. And I imagine it must be so rewarding now to have it out there and to get all this feedback as well. Because you know, it's one thing to write something through your lens and to put it to paper, but to get it out there to the world and to have it resonate with so many people must be, such a fantastic feeling.
It's incredible. It's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm proud of it, and I'm grateful for everyone that's helped me get to this place. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And what I love as well is that I could imagine this on the big screen, I could imagine this being adapted into like even a movie or even like a TV series, like following through all these different adventures. So there's so many places that it could go for the future.
Oh, I would love for that to happen. That would be amazing. Like when you're putting a book together and you're sending it out to literary agents and publishers, you send other sort of similar stories. And I always thought like a little bit Love, Simon, a little bit Call Me by Your Name. Um,
Yeah.
there's a Young Moongo. There are several books and Heartstoppers, that come to mind that are sort of in the same vein, but it's unique.
Yeah.
I think in 1978.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that would be a dream.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be awesome, actually. I think, I
I'd
need
love
to
to
see
see.
this. I feel like I need to see this, now on the big screen because I've
I'd
enjoyed
love
reading it so much and I can
to share
visualize, all these characters.
We could share popcorn and sit there together and
Yeah.
find out like
Yeah.
what the director did, what his vision for them is.
Yeah, but I have to say, I really enjoyed it so much. It's always a sign of a great read when the characters really stick with you and you really think about them and what could happen in the future. So we definitely will be, demanding that follow-up.
Oh, good. Yeah, I love chatting with you. And I have to say, we didn't plan this, but we both have like white long
I
sleeve.
know, right? Yeah.
We look like we're part of a cult or
Yeah.
some futuristic,
Yeah.
or something. But
Yeah, I was like
not
trying to
quite.
hold on to the summer here myself. But so before we wrap up, where can people so not only find you, but where can they find the book? So what are the best places people to find the book?
Well, I love the idea of people going to their independent bookstores and requesting it, because any bookstore, if they don't carry it, can order it very
Yeah.
easily, and they know how to do that. Also on Amazon, Barnes and Noble,
Yeah.
Stora, which is like a new format, bookshops.org. I think in the UK and Europe, Saxon, SAXON.
Yeah.
People have ordered it from there. So it's pretty much everywhere. I think Target carries it in the US.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's out there. You just have to do a search, or through my website, you can link onto at robertraasch.com. You could link to any one of the sites, but just go to Amazon or one of those and it's there.
Very exciting. And, you've got to be super proud of yourself to have this piece of art that you put so much into out there into the world and, the start of many books that I'd be excited to read for the future. So, big congrats to you. And you've got to, it must be such a fantastic feeling as we close out
It is.
2024 to have that out there in the world and all the people that it's going to resonate with for the future.
Thank you, Connor, and thank you for this generous interview. I'm so happy that and delighted that you enjoyed the read, and more to come.
Yes, well, thank you so much for joining me and getting to hear
Book up
the
again. That's
backstory. Yeah,
right.
show it for everyone so they can see. So perfect.
Did a beautiful job on the cover, the
I
publisher.
know I love the cover. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, love it. I love it.
Yeah, so thank you so much for
My
joining me. And thank you to everyone that tuned in for the Queerness Diaries. So we'll be back next week with another episode.